Thanks for joining us for this perspective on storytelling session for the CMC. I'm Michael Wakelam, and I am joined today by Jim Capobianco, a story guru. I'm going to call you a story guru. Is that all right,
A
Jim?
guru, okay.
I think that's all right. Jim was a story artist at Pixar for many, many years, working on many of your favorite films like Toy Story 2, all the way to Inside Out. He was nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for Ratatouille. And I don't probably need to tell you how rare it is for an animated film to be nominated for an original screenplay, so quite an achievement. His short, 2D short, Leonardo, is in the permanent collection at the Museum of Modern Art. Is that right, Jim?
That's correct, in New York
Yeah,
City.
in New York. And he's just finished directing a stop motion feature. So he's been 3D, 2D, and stop motion. And stop motion feature is based on Da Vinci and called The Inventor. And it's premiering in Annecy next month.
That's right.
And Jim also runs Aerial Contrivance, which is a collective, kind of a studio collective, helping people and studios develop their own stories. So thanks for joining
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. It's glad to be here.
So I wanted to have this chat about story with you, the story guru, but I really wanted to touch on a few things. Um, for thousands of years, I guess storytelling wise, we've kind of handed down stories from generation to generation, and the process of doing that has obviously changed as media and storytelling has continually developed. But the importance of quality storytelling really hasn't changed at all. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on, I guess, quality storytelling in our current media landscape.
Mm. Well, I think, yeah, you're totally right. I mean, we've been telling stories forever. I think it's really important for we as communities to tell stories because it brings community together. And I think that's why we tell stories.
Mm.
It's about sharing information, it's about educating, it's about I think just that connection between people. So I think that's the core. That's the core of storytelling. Why? I mean, why do we do this? You know, we're this one animal that tells stories to each other, and it's probably how we develop our technology and our, our societies and everything from working collectively together, and that's done through storytelling. So today, I don't think it's any different today. So in that way, I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't tell quality storytelling. I mean, there's a way, I mean, in a sense, like a story that's just pure entertainment and fun does bring everybody together to kind of enjoy that moment. But I would suppose if it's not a very good story, then everybody's like, that community isn't going to come together, you know? So, I mean, you see it in like streaming shows everybody's talking about, you know, it's a whole like talking around the water cooler about, you know, did you see the latest way back the Seinfeld or the Sopranos or you know, and then they can touch on different moments of it and talk about it, and different people will pick out different things that in a way are important to them. And I
Mm.
think that's kind of stories you rarely remember kind of the whole story, like from A to B to C, but you remember bits in the
Yeah.
story, like moments that spoke to you and you kind of carry with you. And I think the best stories are the ones that you want to revisit again and again, because that's what I find interesting. Because you're told a story, or you see a movie, or you know, or you read a book, and then you see it once and it's fresh, right? You've
Mm.
never experienced it before. But then there's certain ones that you go back to and you watch again, even though you know how it ends. But I think there's something about the journey going on it again, that you're pulling something that's talking to you in some level, like a good conversation with somebody. And so I think that's the strength of really good stories. Is you just want to hear them again and again. You know, why do some last forever, like fairy tales and things like that, and we hear them again and again. And,
Yeah, and I would talk about even some of the Pixar films like that. That we watched The Incredibles a couple of weeks ago with my son, who's now 18, And he saw that when he was a little kid, and now he's appreciating it again on even new levels, things that he
That's
never
true.
saw when he was a kid. And I think if you can, and that's what good stories do well, as well as they have several layers that appeal to several audiences, and that way they can be appreciated over lifetimes.
Yeah, like you said, it's like you revisit it and you get something new from it each time. That's why I do think stories should work on multiple levels and have a different depth. I think the Pixar films do pretty good or have done a pretty good job of that to speak to. I think that's why they were been very popular. Is they
Hmm.
don't just speak to a kid audience or talk down to children. They're talking about subject matter that's a much more detailed or difficult in some ways or dimensional um, subjects that the parents and the adults want to are open to hearing those stories, and then they get something from it, and as do their children. So
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen it, but I guess on a series level, Bluey has really done that as well, appealed to kids and to parents around the world, and been, I guess, just as much, I guess, a model for parenting as for play for kids.
that's great. No, I haven't seen Bluey. I should check it out and write it down.
So, story, I mean, obviously, quality story is important, but I really wanted to talk about story development with you because that's what you've been
Hmm.
focused on for your entire career. And
Yeah.
um, you know, across different mediums, across different budget sizes, and so the model that you've worked with a lot over the years, I guess, the Pixar or Disney model, and I guess you probably also work with this in a similar way at Aerial Contrivance, is that really iterative and collaborative approach. Teaming story artists with a writer and a director, and having this creative, iterative feedback loop to create quality stories. Can you talk about that process and why it's so effective and important?
Sure. Well, I don't think any of these endeavors, especially such a big project like a film, can be one person who does all of it, even in the story development. So, at Pixar, you might have a director who comes up with the initial idea, and then some of them write and some of them don't write. So, generally, what will happen is they'll bring on a writer, and now you have to collaborate with a writer, and you have to be open to their input, because if you weren't, then why do you have them there? So you need to, like, each person who comes on is going to add another level, definitely from their experiences. So I think the best films of work, and I think this is true of filmmaking in general, any artist you bring on is going to add something from their own experiences or DNA or points of view that will add to the the film or story itself. So it's about that time and the people you've brought together in that space of time. But you still have to have the controlling, I don't know, person at the center who can kind of play cop or traffic cop in a way, like,
Yeah.
and can kind of guide it so that it's following the vision that they originally had. Now, that vision can kind of morph and change, but based on all this input coming in, but they really need to process it into like a straight narrative that, and understanding the way audiences may react to it. So, not really like, again, not talk down to the audience and like give them something that they'll want again. It's like you always want to challenge. I think you want to challenge your audiences and give them something maybe they haven't seen before or seen in that way before. But you also have to understand that an audience is going to come in with expectations, and you either honor those expectations or you push against expectations and you give them a twist on it that they didn't see coming. So all those things have to funnel into this one um, process of story building. So to me, in the best animation, and especially feature animation, is it's kind of written in the storyboard process. So
Yeah.
the writers are writing in words, which is kind of the worst form of filmmaking because it's just words, and filmmaking is a visual
Yeah.
medium, right? So it needs to be, especially for animation, everything needs to be visualized ahead of time because you need to plan what you will make. But as you do that, you start to get more ideas, and the story artists are coming up with different takes on how this could work, and the writer is starting to see like a new dimension to their writing. The director obviously is. The director probably has some visions of things that they've had in their mind because they're all visual people. Then it's sort of building on itself and growing in this lovely way. And then by assembling it all, you kind of do a rough blueprint pass of what the film could be like. And then you can watch it and react to it, see what's funny, see what's not funny, see what's dramatically isn't working, see how strong your acts are. Act one, is it setting up the world well? Is act two telling the story you need to tell? With its obstacles and conflicts and obstacles and characters getting around those obstacles in an interesting way. And then your third act, does it resolve itself in a way? Is there a nice climax to all this? Uh, this trajectory of the story? Is it ending in a satisfying way? And you can watch all that and kind of feel it out. And then the best process I've seen is the Pixar process, where it's not just like, okay, we did that, made the film in this story reel. Now we're going to go into production, even though it's a little bit kind of wonky and not working right. In Pixar, I've been on films where they'll tear down the entire movie and reboard the whole thing again, or chunks of it and pieces. And it goes through at Pixar. They're sort of a very technical group and engineering and mathematical group. They kind of decided it's like you have to have at least 3 versions of the story reel before you go into production. So I think if it didn't have 3, they're like, no, there's something wrong here. We must have a third one. So I don't think it's a tried and true rule to me. It may work on the second go around, but I do think you need to be flexible enough to evolve the story beyond the script page and into the storyboarding phase, and then into the story reel phase, and to be willing to go back in and feed the script again into storyboarding again. And it's a very, again, the best way it works is a very fluid process between writers, storyboard artists, and editors, and it's just beautiful how it can evolve as this like sculpture in a sense of story. It's
Yeah,
just
it's
great.
so interesting. I think one of the things actually you just said earlier, which was fascinating, was audience expectations. That's something I guess writers, not necessarily creators, but writers need to think of more and more because of the amount of existing IP that things are based on at the moment. We're in that cycle where everything has to be based on something that has come before, and so
True.
you do go into these projects with or that built-in audience expectation that you have to figure out how to balance with creating something that's original, creating something that's fresh, creating surprising moments. So yeah, that's a real challenge.
Yes. Plus, there's so much media out there and people consuming a lot of stories. But I think, people, they expect a certain way a story will unfold, I think. And so they're somewhat ahead of you in some ways as a creator. And you need to kind of figure out ways to circumvent that or flip it around. I mean, you see some filmmakers that will play with the sort of timeline of how a film will come
Mm.
out, like
Show the end at the beginning, and then
yeah, and then sort of
figure
how
out.
did
Yeah,
this end happen, and so I think that's fascinating. But then it plays against audience expectations, so you have to be very delicate with that because they're like, if they didn't get a good setup and they're confused of the world, then you're going to lose them, and then they'll not like the film or the story. And
So in this, as you say there, like this iterative model, which is so, you know, I guess well regarded and proven, this iterative story development model. I mean, you've worked across big budget Pixar features, but you've also worked in 2D, and you've worked 3D, 2D, stop motion, and I imagine the Inventor budget was nowhere near a Pixar budget.
no,
So
like six
talk.
minutes of a Pixar budget.
So can you talk about how smaller budget projects such as animated series or indie films can implement aspects of this iterative story process, or
Yeah.
how can they better approach story?
Yeah, I mean, I granted, yeah, the Pixar process works because you do have enough budget to, kind of build this film up a couple of times and then rewrite and go back and forth. So, like on the Inventor, I think it benefited somewhat from me being a writer director and my experience in storyboarding. So I was able to wear a lot of hats and kind of get it moving in a way that I didn't have to show anybody or get executive notes and then kind of filter that out and try to figure
Mm.
out how to solve many cooks, or service many cooks. So that helped, but I did still go through the process, and we did a version of the film, and then some of it wasn't working really well, the setups and the second act and stuff. So I again tore it all down, and I went back and rewrote, and we went back in and reboarded it. I lost my first editor because he was like, "Wait, I thought we were done." I'm like, "Nope, we're going back in," and then he was like, "I'm out." So I had to get another editor. Um, but I think you have to still, with a lower budget, find a way to again have that process with your story team, even if it's a tiny little group, to kind of play in it and like try to see where the story takes you, and and if you need to rebuild and rework some of it, just push back and really try to find a way to rework the story as best you can. If you have a bad story, I don't think there's any other parts of the process that can really save you.
No, I mean,
Um,
good story is good business, isn't it?
I mean, maybe you can have a few exciting moments through the film that sort of people like perk up at and go, "Oh, that was an entertaining sequence," but if it doesn't hold together on the whole trajectory of the story, at least to some extent, people aren't going to keep coming back to watch it again and again. It'll just be one of these things you'll process and move on like popcorn.
Mm.
I mean, my one experience with independent filmmaking has been The Inventor, and I think the reason we were able to pull the story off, I don't know, and you'll have to tell me if you think it's a good story or not. Was because of my training and what I've been able to do. I mean, even throughout the process, and this might be something for people to think about who's doing independent things, is really be open to iterating through the process too. But we were able to, as things evolved and changed, like run up against certain things where we couldn't maybe shoot something because we had a camera move in it, but it would take too long. I would go back in and turn those camera move shots into single shots
Mm.
and change the story a bit as we moved. Like things kept evolving even through the production process, not to large extents where I'm reboarding the whole third act or something. So I've worked on movies like at Pixar where we've done that too. But even in an independent film, I think you have to be flexible, and your team should be flexible to adjust the story as you're going along. Because I really feel stories, if you're open to it, will talk to you. They start to tell you
Yeah.
what they need and what And if you don't listen, is when you start to get into trouble with them.
Yeah, I
Because
feel the same. Even at the writing stage,
true, yeah. Mhm.
writing. It can just come out onto the page, and you're like, we didn't even realize that was going to happen in the story. And as you're writing, you get these wonderful little surprises. And the same with the storyboarding process. You like you said earlier, everything is collaborative, and so you've got this script, and then you're working with wonderful story artists who bring in this perspective that you just didn't expect, which
Mhm.
again adds another layer of beauty onto that story process.
Hopefully, you're working with story artists who do
Yeah.
that.
Well, I mean, talking about I guess series and iteration and that iterative process. I don't know if you've seen the series on Netflix, and I was going to bring in technology later, but maybe here would be a good time to chat about this. But the Supergiant Robot Brothers, which was a
Oh yeah,
Mark
well, yeah,
Andrews.
yeah, Mark
Um,
Andrews.
so you would know Mark, and they used Unreal Engine and did a lot of modeling of beforehand, so that they could iterate the story just through mocap and going out and doing the story process that way.
Mm.
And so for series, it can be difficult, budget wise and schedule wise to with that many stories to iterate. But they
Mm.
found this really unique, interesting way combining new tech of mocap and Unreal to iterate and turn those story reels around really quick.
I think that's great. I mean, again, as much as you can iterate, however, in the process. So if you can do it ahead of time in pre-production, great. If you need to, as like I said, as you're filming and doing the production process, that's great too. I mean, I think, and as long as like knowing Mark, he's got a very good um, sense of what he wants, and I think that's kind of the key thing through this process. If you don't have a director or creator who knows like kind of the direction they want to go in or the feel they want or the story, like for me it was always about what are the story tent poles and moments I know need to be in this so that it tells the story properly, or the way the
Yeah,
characters will react to something. I mean, especially in animation where you have animators, you'll have an animator who's animating multiple characters. They don't tend to be like that animator only animates the hero and that animator only animates the villain. Lots of times, especially with stop motion, you'll have an animator animating many different characters. So you need to be the one who goes, no, that character wouldn't act that way. It needs to act this way because it tells the story in a proper way. And
yeah,
those are the only shots I actually sent because we had such a small budget. The only shots I really sent back, unless there was like a catastrophic like mistake in it that we had to go back to the beginning, um, were the shots where the characters weren't telling the story in the right way. And so I think as a director, you need to like, that's your job, is to keep the story on track and that you're telling the movie in the way you've envisioned it. And then people add in all these other things. And if they add to that concept you had, then great. That's the best thing, is when people
mm,
bring these things in. And so if the process, like Mark's process of being able to be a lot of really flexible, even on set in a way, then and developing and through this more sort of organic, I guess, sense, I think that's
yeah,
great. Again, he found a way that maybe other people can emulate, how you can keep evolving the story. It doesn't end until it's blocked and you like sent it to the network or the distributors or whatever. There's a process. I mean, even doing sound on the Inventor, we just finished it a couple of weeks ago. It was still a process of like finding the right moment in the sound to like add to the story again, like give it a new dimension to add impact this moment. And it was interesting to see this thing I thought was already kind of there evolve into another phase. And
yeah,
I think that's important to convey, is that to understand that each process, the character designs, the sets, the way you frame the camera, the sound design, again, the music, the way the music is put, it's all part of the story
Yeah,
process.
yeah. I mean, I had a note here about characters and the amount of times that I've, had discussions or even interviewed people, situations where a director has said, "Oh, for instance, that was Jim, the story artist's idea. He came up with that, and that really added so much and elevated that character or made them a lot more memorable."
Hmm.
So it's that again that iterative process, the layers upon layers, where you can continue to mine for that richness in the story.
True. I mean, you have to, and as the creator, the director, you need to really be open to listening to your team. I mean, really go be humble and know you don't know everything,
Hmm.
and let the team provide the like. I think the best, I think the task of the director is one, to keep the idea of the film in mind, but also by doing that, creating and communicating to the team what you would like, and then also creating that playing space, safe playing space for everybody to bring their best work and know that they can give you ideas that you're not going to be like, read, like set in stone of the way you want to tell it. You're much more like open to, like a sponge. You just want to take in all this stuff, and
Yeah,
and you may not accept all the ideas, but you're definitely going to be open to hearing what they have to bring.
and that's the same across animation, 2D, 3D, stop motion, and live action. The director really is bringing out the best in everybody, and from the
Yeah,
actors to the on set people,
yeah,
just trying to bring out the best of everyone.
yeah.
Um,
That's true.
I wanted to just get your thoughts before we finish on standing out. You mentioned earlier there's so much media out there. Do you have any tips, any thoughts on standing out in such a crowded content landscape?
No. Good PR.
This is true.
um, well, I think the best way is to be honest with your storytelling. I think we're all individuals, and we all have our own points of view on the world and stories we want to tell and how we want to tell it. I think it's better to try to tell it in your way, and then in trying to, you know, uh, try to emulate this other person, or try to kind of chase. This is like, this is the thing everybody's excited about right now, so I'm going
Mm.
to chase that, instead of telling something that's true to your own voice. And maybe finding, you may not know what your voice is, but try to explore and try to find what your voice may be. I think it's like trying to find, well, what's the new thing I can do? And it may not always succeed. So I think it's about taking risks too, as a creator. I mean, this is hard because you got to get the money, and usually the executives and stuff, they're the ones who want to chase the last thing that made
Yeah,
money, and they don't really have an imagination beyond that. But as a filmmaker, a creator, a storyteller, you need to kind of always push against that and try to tell your story in the way you see it told. Now, we're all individuals, but we're all, well, similar in a lot of ways too. So I usually think if that's something you're excited about telling, or a viewpoint you have, I would imagine there's a lot of people out there who would also be interested in that viewpoint, or might have the same kind of
yeah,
feelings
yeah. I
or
agree.
stuff. And that's
Yeah,
why we can connect on stories. That's why people
yeah. And
would
I
like
hate
to
to
listen.
use a film to prove a point about storytelling, but there's
Sure.
the Bradley Cooper film, A Star Is Born, the remake of the remake,
Mm-hmm.
and his character says in that film that everyone can sing, or a lot of people can sing. The difference is having something to say, and I always
Mm-hmm.
remember that line because it is about having something to say, from your unique point of view, like you were just saying. And it may be the same thing. I mean, that even that film in his example, being a remake of a remake, that he
Sure.
did it in such a way that it was still, a hit with audiences. So, yeah, definitely having something to say, having that perspective.
Because even a
Um,
remake has to go through the process of these new. artists telling it, and somebody
Yeah.
went, I need to make this remake, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then and again, it's like those artists at that time came together to make it, and hopefully they're all bringing a new perspective to that story. um,
Yeah, definitely. So you've just finished the Inventor, and that was really a project within, under the Aerial Contrivance banner as well.
mhm.
And so is that how you pretty much work? If you're developing stories with someone else, if a director comes to you, you would work in that similar iterative way?
For sure, yeah. I mean, it's the only way I know how to work on these things. So, yeah, I think for sure we would bring, and hopefully they're open. I think we would only work with them if they were open to the process, because that's
Mm.
the process we would do. And so we would take the idea in, and they would hopefully, be a strong enough voice that they would guide it, and we would bring in the assets for them, like the artists they would need, and help support them, and again bring in sort of a process of like, well, what if do you think of this, or how about this direction or that direction? It's really like my training in
Mm.
storyboarding and story art. We always You're always subservient to the director and what they want to do. And I think that's the way we would approach what we did as well. And we developed a film called Philharmonia Fantastique, which is like a Fantasia for live orchestras. Actually, we just had a premiere in England in April. It was April, yeah.
Really?
And
And that was with Gary Rydstrom as
Gary
well? Yeah.
Rydstrom, and the composer is Mason Bates. And it was
Hmm.
Mason's idea to do it. And he had kind of a loose sort of concept. And then like he had an idea too. When people see it, his original concept was like a little girl in a classroom, like kind of teaching about music, and then it would go into kind of this what she was teaching. So it was one of our first meetings. I was kind of like, well, think about this. If you have this girl, we have to decide, well, one, it's a girl, so are we limiting the audience in a way? Do we have an aspect that brings in boys and stuff? Um, is she white? Is she Asian? Is she black? Like, you have to, all these other elements start to come into play. So I said, if it's just universal like music, what if we create a character that's neither, maybe it's not, um, totally obvious it's a female or a male character. It's definitely not like an ethnicity or anything. It's just kind of the embodiment of music. And maybe we start there. And then Mason was like, oh, I love that. What would that look like? And then we brought in an artist, and so this is the iterative process
Hmm.
where it starts to build on each other. And so we created a character we call the sprite. And I think we started referring to her as she because she does come across as that. But I was always trying to like go, well, she's not really a she. It's kind of a he. It doesn't. We're not really. You don't really know. So I think that's fine. And then you can interpret it however you'd like. And I think lots of times that's sort of maybe one of the stronger things about story is if you leave some things to interpretation, um, or you allow the audience to add it up. Like Billy Wilder and Ernst Lubitsch always had a thing like it's not 2 plus 2 equals 4, it's 2 plus 2 equals, you don't know what it equals, or
Yeah.
equals 6 or something. So it doesn't, you don't tell the audience the answer, you let them put it together for themselves. So yeah, that's our process at Aerial Contrivance, is like trying to work with the creators who come in and try to help them make the best thing they want to make. So and then yeah, we can do it as little, like just brainstorm stuff with them, or like Philharmonia, we took it till the end.
Great. Well, I look forward to seeing The Inventor. Can't wait to see how that came out, and talking with you more about that. But
That'd
wish
be
you all the
great.
best for Annecy and the launch, as that rolls out into theaters. Congrats on getting it over the line.
Thank you. Yes. I can't
Uh,
believe we did it. So
yeah, you did. You did. It's all done.
did it? Yes. Wait, I did. Okay.
Yeah.
Pinch
And
myself.
if you're listening and you're attending the Children's Media Conference, or you'd like to, then please check out. There's a session on the Tuesday about storytelling, building story worlds, developing IP, and growing a franchise. So be sure to check that out, and many of the other great videos that people are sharing in the lead up. So thank you very much. Thanks, Jim.
Great. Awesome. You're welcome. Thanks. Thanks everybody for listening in.